Treza, good to have you with us here on RT. Our top story, Russia and China have vetoed the latest UN Security Council resolution on Syria. Moscow says it's because the draft didn't reflect the real situation in Damascus and was sending unbalanced signals to all sides in the conflict. RT's Marina Portnaya has more.
In a matter of just 5 minutes after the meeting began, Russia and China both wielded their veto powers, not supporting this draft resolution that was written up by the Arab League and European countries. While the draft resolution was supported by 13 members of the Security Council, Russia was asking for some amendments. According to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, those amendments were not excessive, and Mr. Lavrov said that Russia was urging the West to accommodate Moscow's concerns to reach a compromise on this draft resolution. China said during the meeting that it supported Russia's amendments and said for the Council to approach a vote, knowing that there was a divide, it did not help maintain the unity or the authority of the Security Council. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow does not support using the Security Council as a tool to intervene on a sovereign country that is experiencing an internal conflict. He believes that could create chaos in international affairs. So as we see, there was 2 vetoes on this resolution. It did not go through, and it's because Russia believes that as the draft resolution was presented, it had a lot of imbalances in it when it comes to the current circumstance in Syria. Russian envoy to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin, did go into detail about those imbalances.
Our work in the Security Council has not yet reached its conclusion. The draft resolution put to the vote does not adequately reflect the real situation in Syria and sends an unbalanced signal to both sides. The co-sponsors of the resolution have not, in the wording of the draft, taken into account that the Syrian opposition must distance itself from extremist groups committing violent acts, or called on states with the ability to use their influence to prevent such acts. Nor have our proposals been taken into account that, along with withdrawing the Syrian armed forces from the cities, there should be an end to attacks by armed groups on state institutions and neighbourhoods. Nor has there been support for affording more flexibility to the intermediary efforts of Arab League states to increase the chances of a successful political process. The Russian delegation was forced to vote against this draft resolution. We seriously regret this outcome of our joint work.
Russia's foreign minister is scheduled to visit Damascus on Tuesday to meet with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. This is a move to hopefully reach some type of peaceful approach or solution to the conflict still waging in Syria. The Arab League has also addressed the media at the Security Council at the stakeout, saying that they are extremely disappointed over today's outcome, but they will continue trying to work with the Security Council, with the United Nations, to try to reach some type of consensus. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama did also issue a statement of his own before the meeting began, stating that the United States is on the side of the Syrian people that are opposing the Syrian president and his government. And he said, quote, the Assad regime, the time has come for the Assad regime to end, to change. Clearly, the United States is pushing for regime change. This is a sticking point. This is something that Russia does not support. So we'll see what takes place in the days and weeks to come. But as of now, the draft text proposed by the Europeans, by the Arab League, vetoed by Russia and China.
More on the Security Council failing to pass a resolution on Syria. We can go live to international affairs commentator Rick Rozoff from the group Stop NATO. So with the new resolution vetoed at the UN, what do you think is the next step?
This could cut both ways. What I fear is we may see a replication of what happened in 1999 when the United States and its NATO allies launched a 78-day bombing campaign against Yugoslavia, having failed to enlist Chinese and Russian support for a UN resolution against that nation, Yugoslavia. I'm hoping, of course, that the resolute stand and the principled stand taken by Russia and China against a resolution that we have to remember was sponsored by Morocco and co-sponsored by a very interesting group of people. They include the NATO Quad, if you will, the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, along with Portugal. They include all 6 members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, that is the monarchies and emirates in the Persian Gulf. They include the other two monarchies in the Arab world, Morocco and Jordan, who last May applied to join the Gulf Cooperation Council, and Turkey. This is, I might add, Libya. We can hardly talk about a government in the condition of lawless anarchy that obtains in that country, but the regime of Libya was one of the co-sponsors. This is not a representative group of nations, of course, in the United Nations or the world. It's a very select one. It's largely the same group that passed a comparable resolution in 1973 against Libya last year, which resulted, as we know, in a 7-month bombing campaign against that nation.
What role do you think the international community will now play in resolving the crisis after the UN vote?
Well, the true international community, that is 194 members of the United Nations, and including most particularly the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and other countries have to take a much more pronounced role in this. It's just as the Arab League has effectively been hijacked by the 8 Arab monarchies I just mentioned, so too has the United Nations, and the very name of the international community, been appropriated by the United States and its NATO allies, and now it's allies in the Arab world. So the international community should, in fact, demand no military solutions to internal crises. We should keep in mind, for example, that the so-called Free Syrian Army is operating with complete impunity inside Turkey, a NATO member, with the collaboration of the Turkish government, presumably with that of other NATO nations and the Gulf Cooperation Council members, which are all NATO partners, incidentally. And that no armed uprising of the sort occurring in Syria could have occurred, as in Libya earlier or Kosovo in Yugoslavia 13 years ago, without the understanding by those engaging in this armed uprising that they would be supported by forces outside the country.
Russia says the current draft included measures against the Assad regime, but not against armed opposition groups working in the country. Do you think Western countries fall short of condemning both sides in the conflict?
I've read the draft, and in fact, the first two parts of it are explicitly and exclusively targeted against the government of Damascus. Only in the third is there a rather nebulous statement about all sides should refrain from violence. But it is so overwhelmingly targeted against the government and not against armed opposition groups operating, again, from outside the country. Were armed groups to be invading the territory of the United States, for example, from Mexico or Canada, I can assure you that Washington's response would not be limited to a domestic one.
Moscow says Western states have fallen into the habit of using the UN as a tool to bring about regime change. Do you think that's a fair accusation?
Unfortunately, it's a completely accurate accusation, and especially after the failure to obtain the UN resolution for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the U.S. and its Western allies have shifted gears, if you will, and they've used other organizations like the League of Arab States, which, as I mentioned, is effectively controlled by the Gulf Cooperation Council, Jordan and Morocco currently, have used them as the front, to request military intervention, as in the case of Libya last year, and certainly that was the intent. The intent, rather, was to replicate that model in Syria. I'm hoping again that Russia and China's decision to veto the resolution, which would have been preparatory too, you can absolutely count on it. The enforcement, the introduction of a later resolution to enforce a no-fly zone, with all that entails, which is to say, cruise missiles from U.S. and other NATO warships in the Mediterranean landing inside Syria, and something on the order of the 26,000 air sorties conducted by NATO over Libya last year.
All right, Rick Rozoff from the group Stop NATO, thanks for your time.